Hey there, Professor. Uh, to kick off the presentation, we have grammatical differences between Irish English and British English. Firstly, Irish English has unmarked plurality in nouns indicating time and measure. 2 mile, for instance, and 5 year. That would be instead of 2 miles with the S and 5 years with the S. Also, Irish English makes an explicit distinction between singular you, ye, and plural yous. So I said to Jill, Mary, yous wash the dishes. See how I did the accent? Yeah. Yes, they use. It's very different from any English in the world. Another characteristic of Irish English is nominalization, giving a word or phrase a noun-like status that it doesn't generally have. As in, if I had the doing of it again, I'd do it different. So they take a verb and turn it into a noun, doing the verb. Okay, that's it for grammatical differences. Let's go on to the next slide. Hey, here we have Conor McGregor, a famous Irishman, and the Queen Elizabeth, a famous British woman. And Conor would say that phrase like, "We done it, we're rich, baby." And the Queen would say, "Oi, mate, can I get a cup of water?" So you can see that the Irish emphasize the R in the words, whereas British people usually don't pronounce it as in water. The R is very weak in the pronunciation. Still on pronunciation differences, here we have an explanation on those differences. The most important distinction between these accents is simply the pronunciation of the letter R. In Ireland, the intervocalic R is pronounced before the consonant and at the end of words. In England, it is the opposite. Example: a student with a perfect Oxford accent would practically not pronounce the R, therefore emphasizing the previous vowel even more. It will sound like this: ka and pa. An Irishman pronounces these words of the R, that is, car and part. The S before a consonant assumes the sound sh. For examples in words such as sheep or ship. So don't be surprised if you hear, instead of start and stop, start and stop. It is strange, but it is a fact.
Hi, I'm Ketlyn, and I, I'm going to talk a little bit about the historical and cultural parting of Ireland. The historical context of English in Ireland. In the Middle Ages, when the British invaded Ireland, the north of the country became one of the United Kingdom. The English language has become widely used in court, legal situation, administrative burning, and among entrepreneurs. English has become the most used language in business, political, and commercial transactions. It eventually expanded to become the main language of the Irish population. The island is divided into Republic of Ireland and North Ireland. Some curiosities and legends say the shamrock is of great importance to the Irish Celtic. The shamrock is the symbol of the Republic. Over the centuries, the inhabitants of the island have shifted to the English-speaking Gaelic, correct text, search and pronunciation, vocabulary, grammatical structure, etc. English spoken in Ireland has many dialects. varying by region? Some curious that coach meditation about the Irish culture are present in these phrases for explaining visually the language in cultural influences. Example, I'm not late. I'm running on Irish time. The other is, if Tia can't fix it, it's a serious problem.
So, I'm gonna talk a little about vocabulary. There are some English words that have Irish origin, and I'm gonna talk a little about some of them that I thought it would be interesting. So, the word slogan is really common. We use it even in Portuguese, and it comes from the Irish slogan, that means battle cry. So this was one that I thought it would be really interesting to mention. The word poker doesn't have a clear origin. Some people says it comes from German. Some says it comes from the French word pocket. But there are also those who say it came from the Irish pocket, that means pocket. So, other word is shamrock. The shamrock is one of Ireland's most important symbols, that is the clover, and it is from the Irish word shamrock, that means young clover. The word galore isn't that common to see it being used, but it exists in English and it means many. So it comes from the word galore from Irish, that means enough or sufficient. The word bard is really common. You see it being used a lot in RPGs, and it first it was a derogatory term for itinerant musicians, but it was later romanticized. So nowadays it doesn't have a derogatory meaning anymore. The word smashing is an adjective mostly used in the UK that means something is excellent, wonderful. So it comes from the phrase smachting, that means that is good, from the Irish. So it sounds like smashing, so they adapted it. The word trousers also come from Irish, from the word thrills, and it had the same meaning that it has today. Now, the word quark doesn't really come from Irish, but I thought it would be interesting to mention because it is related to Ireland somehow. So, the physicists that discovered the quarks at first decided to name it quark with a no. Sometime then he was reading the Irish writer James Joyce's romance Finnegan's Wake, and there was the following line: three quarks for Master Mark. And he thought it was interesting because, just as the line, the quarks were seen in trees. So he decided to rename it to Quarks. So it had an influence from Ireland somehow. So there are many words that I could explain, but I chose those three that I thought was interesting. So the first one is Arhusle. It means something like dear or darling, and it could be literally translated as something like pulse from the heart. And it actually comes from the phrase "Arhusle Mohroi," that means pulse from my heart. And I thought it was cute and I decided to mention it. So the next word is begrudgery. It has the same meaning as envy, and it comes from the Middle English begrudgen. And lastly, there's the word gob. Gob is used as a synonym for mouth or beak. And there's a toast in Irish that is gobflia, that means wet mouth. So gob being mouth and flirt being wet.